People love to believe they're smarter than the system, especially when it comes to money they don't actually have. I've watched this for nearly a century. Brilliant people, educated people, successful people ruin their lives with debt they thought they could manage. They call it leverage. I call it legalized self-deception. And if you're sitting there right now debating whether you should invest or pay off your debt, well, you're already on the wrong side of the fence. You've allowed the idea of owing to become normal. That's how financial disasters begin. One smart justification at a time. People think debt is harmless if you use it wisely. They tell themselves stories. My debt is cheap. My returns are high, so I'm winning. No, you're not winning. You're juggling fire while standing in a room full of gasoline. I've never met anyone who went broke without first owing money to someone. That's not coincidence. That's a law of nature. The smartest investors I know don't sleep better because they own great stocks. They sleep better because they're not owned. You can't build rational wealth with an irrational burden on your back. You can't think long-term when you have short-term debt. And you can't call yourself free when someone else controls your next paycheck. Here's something nobody tells you. Debt changes how you think. It forces short-term decisions. It kills patience. And patience, well, patience in investing is like oxygen. I've watched people brag about beating the market while carrying high-interest loans. It's like bragging about swimming faster when your pockets are full of rocks. In the end, you sink. When I was young, the Great Depression was still fresh in everyone's memory. People understood pain. They feared debt as much as they feared disease. And that fear kept them financially alive. Today, we treat debt like it's a vitamin. Everyone takes it. Nobody thinks it'll kill them. But debt doesn't kill fast. It kills quietly. It's terrible when your luck runs out. You want to invest? Fine. But don't call it investing if you're using borrowed money. That's gambling in a tuxedo. The only difference between a gambler and a leveraged investor is the gambler knows he's gambling. I've seen leverage ruin people 10 times smarter than you or me. Intelligence doesn't protect you from compounding stupidity. The math of debt is brutal. It compounds against you with perfect discipline. And compound interest, whether it's working for you or against you, never stops. I often say the first rule of compound interest is never interrupt it unnecessarily. Well, debt is the interruption. It's a parasite feeding on your future. People ask me, Charlie, what if my debt is at 3% and I can invest at 7%? Well, genius, what if the 7% disappears? What if your investment drops 40%? What if you lose your job next month? Debt doesn't care about your projections. Debt collection always happens. It's funny how people overcomplicate things. You don't need a spreadsheet to know what's right. You need common sense. If you owe, pay. If you're free, stay free. Because freedom compounds better than any stock I've ever owned. At the end of the day, wealth isn't about how much you make. It's about how little you owe. When you owe nothing, every dollar you earn belongs entirely to you. And when you control your time, your decisions, your peace, that's true wealth. So before you chase the next investment trend, ask yourself this: are you building freedom or just decorating your prison? That's the real question. People like to think money is emotional, but it's not. It's arithmetic, and arithmetic doesn't care about your feelings, your optimism, or your fancy investment theories. Let's talk basic math. The kind you can draw on a napkin. If you owe $10,000 at 15% interest, that's a guaranteed loss of $1,500 per year. You can't diversify that away. You can't work around it. It's a guaranteed negative return. Now tell me where you're going to find a guaranteed positive return of 15% in the stock market without taking risk. You won't, at least not legally. That's the brutal beauty of debt. It's certain, and certainty is the most dangerous thing in finance when it turns against you. I've watched thousands of people obsess over their portfolio allocation while ignoring the debt interest eating them alive. They'll debate whether to have 5% more Apple or 5% less Tesla, while their credit card balance grows silently faster than either of those companies ever could. That's not investing. That's intellectual theater. It looks smart, but it's stupidity in bulk. You don't fix a leaking boat by buying a more powerful motor. You fix the hole first. Debt is the hole. Investing before you fix it is like rowing faster toward the iceberg. They say, but Charlie, the market averages 10% a year. Sure, over long periods and with a stomach strong enough to endure a 50% drop without panicking. Most people don't have that stomach. They have a pulse, and when the market drops, their confidence drops with it. Meanwhile, their debt keeps growing like a metronome, steady, tireless, indifferent to market swings. The math doesn't care if the S&P recovers in 2 years or 10. Your lender wants payment next month. When you're in debt, you enter a race between compound interest and accumulated wisdom. Most people lose because they underestimate how fast stupidity multiplies. You can't think clearly when the meter's running. Debt hits your mind before it hits your wallet. You start making rushed decisions instead of smart ones. You sell early, panic late, and start praying for miracles. That's not rational investing. That's survival mode. I've always said, if you can't handle a little misfortune, you don't deserve good fortune. But when you're leveraged, even small misfortune can be fatal. That's why I've seen more investors ruined by debt than by bad stock picks. A bad stock teaches you humility. Debt teaches you despair. If you really understood math, you'd treat high-interest debt like a house on fire. You wouldn't stand there analyzing the architecture. You'd get out. You'd pay it off, even if it means delaying your grand investment dreams. I once told a student who wanted to invest while carrying credit card debt, "You're asking me whether you should invest or pay off a guaranteed 20% obligation. It's like asking whether you should drink water or gasoline." The right answer is obvious. It's just inconvenient. And people don't like inconvenient truths. The truth is, paying off debt is the best risk-free return you'll find. It's boring, yes, but staying solvent is boring too. Everyone wants thrills until those thrills cause a margin call. Then they discover that boredom is underrated. The best investors I've met, including Buffett, never saw debt as a leverage tool. They saw it as a virus. You need to contain it early, or it spreads until it kills you. So when you ask me, should I invest or pay my debt, I'll tell you this. The person without debt can wait for opportunity. The person with debt has to beg for mercy. And the market, my friend, doesn't reward beggars. You can't think clearly when you owe money. Doesn't matter how smart you are. Debt alters your brain's structure. I've watched brilliant people lose their brilliance because they were constantly calculating what they owed instead of what they owned. When you're in debt, your world becomes smaller. Every decision becomes defensive. You stop thinking about opportunities and start thinking about survival. That's not freedom. That's servitude with Wi-Fi. People often say debt is a tool. Yeah. The same way a chainsaw is a tool, useful in the hands of a skilled professional, but catastrophic in the hands of the careless. And most people, financially speaking, are careless. There's something deeply corrosive about owing money. It undermines your independence. It changes how you talk to your boss. It makes you tolerate things you shouldn't. It teaches you to rationalize instead of resist. That's why I've always respected the old-fashioned idea of living within your means. Not because it's virtuous, but because it's practical. You can't develop sound judgment in a mind that's constantly under pressure. You need mental space to think, and debt rents that space to someone else. I've watched people make absurd investment decisions just to catch up. They pile into speculative stocks. They panic buy crypto. They listen to idiots on television yelling about fast returns. And the whole time, they're telling themselves, I just need one good win. That's not investing, that's desperation with a spreadsheet. The irony is people in debt often work harder than anyone, but their effort benefits someone else more. Their time converts into interest income for the bank. And the bank, as you may have noticed, doesn't get tired. You can't buy peace of mind on credit. You can only rent it for a short while before the bill comes due. That's why I never understood this obsession with good debt versus bad debt. Both are dangerous. One kills you slowly, the other quickly, but both keep you from sleeping well at night. You want to build real wealth? Start by eliminating financial anxiety. That's your foundation. Every dollar of debt you eliminate is one less chain on your mind. And a free mind, well, that's the ultimate multiplying machine. When I was a young lawyer, I didn't have much, but I didn't owe anybody either. That made me dangerous in the best way. I could walk away from bad deals. I could say no without fear. That single advantage, independence, was worth more than any leverage ratio. Most people never realize the true return of paying off debt isn't just financial. It's psychological. It gives you back choice. It restores your ability to wait. And patience, as I've said many times, is the rarest form of intelligence in the investment world. So ask yourself, what's your goal here? To look rich or be free? Because if you pick the first one, the second one will never happen. Every generation convinces itself it's reinvented what debt means. They give it sophisticated names. Good leverage, capital optimization, financial efficiency, but strip away the jargon and it's the same old stupidity dressed in modern clothes. Leverage, in any form, amplifies outcomes whether good or bad. The problem is, human nature guarantees the bad will eventually show up. And when it does, leverage turns a stumble into a free fall. I've seen this movie so many times I've lost count. It always starts the same way. Someone borrows to accelerate gains. They tell themselves they're being rational, just using other people's money smartly. And for a while it works. They make some clever moves. The numbers look great, and their confidence builds. They start believing they've mastered the art of taking risk. Then the market hiccups, interest rates tick up slightly, a deal goes wrong, and suddenly everything they built starts collapsing like wet cardboard. That's not bad luck, that's arithmetic meeting reality. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you're highly leveraged, you don't own your assets, they own you. You're just renting the illusion of prosperity. In the 1970s, Buffett and I watched brilliant people ruin themselves with borrowed money. Didn't matter how good their businesses were, a few bad quarters and the creditors showed up. The graveyard of capitalism is littered with geniuses who optimize their balance sheets. Even today, I see people justify using leverage because interest rates are low. It's like saying you should play Russian roulette because the odds look good this round. Eventually, the chamber spins. Here's the real tragedy. Leverage doesn't just destroy portfolios, it destroys temperament. You can't stay calm when a few bad weeks threaten to wipe you out. You can't think long-term when short-term can kill you. And when fear kicks in, intelligence leaves. That's why Buffett and I built Berkshire with virtually no debt. Not because we didn't understand leverage, but because we understood it too well. We wanted to survive any environment, not just succeed in the easy ones. The ability to sit still when everyone else is panicking, that's the ultimate edge. And you can't do that if the bank controls your nerves. People ask me, Charlie, what about using debt to buy real estate or invest in a business? I tell them, if you need to borrow heavily to make a deal work, the deal isn't good enough. It's that simple. The best opportunities don't need leverage to shine. They're attractive even when conservatively financed. The moment your investment depends on the kindness of lenders, you've stopped being an investor. You're a hostage. I once heard someone brag about borrowing at 3% to invest at 6%. I told him, you're earning 3% and risking 100%. He didn't like that answer. Most people don't. They prefer a pleasant illusion to an unpleasant truth. The truth is, leverage makes you fragile. It turns temporary setback into permanent loss. It punishes arrogance faster than stupidity. And it guarantees that one day you'll meet the margin clerk, finance's most unforgiving teacher. If you can't sleep at night, you're over-indebted. If a market drop ruins your plans, you're over-leveraged. And if you need luck to stay solvent, you're not an investor, you're a speculator begging for mercy. My advice: don't play games with borrowed matches. The house always burns faster than you expect. People think the goal is to get rich. It's not. The real goal is independence. You don't want more money to buy more things. You want it to stop doing stupid things, and nothing is stupider than trading your freedom for leverage. Debt sells the illusion of progress. It whispers, you can have it now and pay later. But later always arrives, and when it does, it charges interest, both financial and psychological. I've watched people trap themselves in jobs they hate because they need the income. I've watched families postpone happiness for decades because they were buried under manageable mortgages. I've watched investors with great judgment make cowardly decisions because their loans dictated their behavior. That's not wealth. That's slavery wearing a necktie. Freedom doesn't come from owning more, it comes from owing less. When you owe nobody, you can think clearly. You can say no when everyone else has to say yes. You can ignore the crowd, ignore the panic, ignore the noise because you're not desperate. People underestimate how powerful that is. Independence is like oxygen. You only notice when it's gone. In the 1990s, I watched a generation of investors use their homes as collateral to buy tech stocks. They thought they were smart. They called it financial engineering. Then the bubble popped, and they discovered a simple truth. You can't cash out paper profits when the margin call arrives. The irony is, the ones who avoided leverage looked boring for years until everyone else blew up. Suddenly, boring looked brilliant. That's the story of capitalism in one sentence. I've said it 1,000 times. You don't need to be smarter than everyone. You just need to stay sane longer than everyone, and staying sane is impossible when you're under pressure. People think I'm obsessed with avoiding debt. They're right. I am. Because I've seen what happens when life doesn't go according to plan. And it never does. You lose your job, you get sick, markets crash, and the people who survive aren't the ones with the biggest portfolios, they're the ones with the smallest obligations. That's the paradox of wealth. The freer you are, the wealthier you feel. And that feeling doesn't come from a brokerage account. It comes from control. Control over your time, your choices, your peace of mind. That's why I tell people the best investment you can make isn't in stocks or a company. It's in reclaiming your independence, one debt dollar at a time. A good night's sleep is priceless. You can't accumulate wisdom under pressure, and you can't make rational decisions while someone else has claim on your future. When you're debt-free, you can wait for the right pitch. When you're leveraged, you have to swing at whatever comes. That's the difference between discipline and desperation. Yeah, freedom always beats leverage. It might look slower. It might feel less exciting, but it's permanent. And permanence in a world built on volatility is the ultimate competitive advantage. You'd think after centuries of financial disasters, people would have learned. But no. Every generation starts from scratch with the same delusions. They all believe they found a smarter way to balance debt and investing. The young ones call it using leverage responsibly. The older ones call it making my money work for me. And they all forget that money only works when you're not enslaved to it. Like I said before, the human mind is brilliant at self-deception. We rationalize stupidity faster than we correct it. So when people tell themselves, I'll invest while I slowly pay down my loans, what they're really saying is, I want to feel rich even though I'm poor. That's an emotional strategy disguised as financial planning. And emotion is the enemy of rational finance. I remember a young man who asked me once, Mr. Munger, wouldn't it be better to invest rather than pay my student loans? The market always goes up long term. I told him, son, markets go up long term, but you don't live long term. You live month to month, year to year, and debt compounds daily. He looked disappointed because he wanted a clever answer. But in life, it's simple arithmetic that saves you, not fancy theories. People always reach for leverage because they hate the slow path. They can't stand the idea of spending 5 or 10 years getting their finances in order before investing. So they skip ahead. They invest first and tell themselves they'll manage the risk. But reality doesn't care about your impatience. If you skip the boring steps, you don't accelerate, you detonate. Buffett and I built Berkshire on a simple foundation: discipline first, growth second. That's why we never had to sell assets in a panic. That's why we sailed through 73, 87, 2008 without losing sleep. Because we never let debt dictate our decisions. Most people don't have that luxury, not because they can't, but because they won't. They're addicted to comfort. They can't delay gratification, so they try to engineer it using leverage. They want to look successful today, not be successful tomorrow. I've watched this story end the same way every time. Debt gives you a little boost at the start, then slowly consumes you. It's like sugar, quick energy, but long-term side effects. And here's the most tragic part. When you live in debt, you lose your risk tolerance. At the exact moment opportunity arrives, you'll watch the market crash, and instead of buying, you'll panic because you need liquidity to survive. The brave become fearful, and the foolish become broke. Debt doesn't just ruin your finances, it ruins your timing. It makes you a slave to volatility. It forces you to react instead of think. As I've said many times, the best investors in the world don't need constant thrills. They need endurance, but endurance only comes from strength. And you can't be strong when you're under pressure. Yeah, most people get this backwards. They think investing will free them from debt. Actually, avoiding debt is what allows you to become a great investor. It's the hard work, the saving, living below your means, cutting expenses, that builds the foundation for compound interest. But people avoid that because it doesn't look glamorous on social media. They want quick results, not permanent ones. Well, the world rewards permanence. And the graveyard of finance is full of people who confuse speed with intelligence. So, here's my advice. If you ever catch yourself bragging about how efficiently you use credit, stop. You're one step from humility. Debt doesn't just steal your money, it steals your time. And time, as I've said my whole life, is the raw material of compound interest. You see, compound interest only works when you give it decades to do its magic. Debt destroys that timeline. It forces you to focus on the next payment instead of the next decade. That's the part most people miss. They think the cost of debt is just the interest rate. No, the real cost is the distraction. It steals your ability to think long-term. It undermines your patience, which is the most valuable trait you can have as an investor. When you owe money, your brain becomes a short-term machine. You start thinking in weeks and months instead of years. You can't let investments mature. You can't sit still through downturns. You can't maintain rationality when the lender wants cash, but the market offers chaos. Debt makes people fragile, and fragility is the enemy of compound interest. I've known countless investors who could have built fortunes if they'd had the chance to wait. But you can't wait when you're leveraged. You sell at the wrong time, for the wrong reason, to the wrong buyer. And worst of all, you call it discipline. No, that's not discipline, that's survival. Buffett and I built our wealth by avoiding situations that forced us to act. We wanted to choose when to move, not be forced to move. That's the difference between freedom and servitude. I once said the first rule of compound interest is never interrupt it unnecessarily. Debt is the mother of all interruptions. It's the financial equivalent of pulling a plant out of the ground every few months to check if it's growing. And yet, people keep doing it. Constant refinancing, borrowing, rolling balances. They call it financial management. I call it financial self-sabotage. Here's a rule nobody teaches in school. Every dollar you owe is a dollar that can't earn compound interest. And every year you spend paying for old mistakes is a year stolen from your future freedom. If you start investing at 25 and stay debt-free, time becomes your ally. If you start investing at 35, buried in debt, time becomes your enemy. Same person, different outcome. All because of leverage. People love to talk about the power of compound interest, but they forget it works both ways. Debt compounds too, just in the opposite direction. It's like running a marathon while dragging an anchor. When you're debt-free, even small progress multiplies. When you're in debt, even large progress gets neutralized. That's why the rich stay rich. They let compound interest work for them uninterrupted, and that's why the middle class stays stagnant. They spend their lives generating compound interest for the bank. It's a silent trap. It doesn't explode like a crisis. It corrodes like rust. Debt interrupts consistency, and interruptions over a lifetime cost fortunes. Avoid debt. Stay in the game. Let time do the heavy lifting. That's how ordinary people become extraordinary investors, slowly, quietly, and without leverage. People keep asking the wrong question. They ask, Charlie, should I invest or pay my debt, like it's a math problem? It's not. It's an ownership question. Who owns your time? Who owns your peace of mind? Who owns the next 10 years of your life? If the answer isn't you, then the debate is over. I've said it before. The world is full of people who look rich but aren't free. They drive leased cars, live in financed houses, and invest borrowed money. They've built beautiful cages, and they're so busy decorating them, they don't notice the lock on the door. That's the tragedy of modern finance. People confuse activity with progress. They think managing investments and loans makes them sophisticated, but complexity doesn't make you smart. Simplicity protects you. I knew a man in the 60s, a lawyer, very educated, sharp as a tack. He always bragged about how he used smart leverage to invest in real estate. He used to lecture everyone about efficient capital allocation. After one recession, the bank owned everything. He didn't lose his intelligence. He lost his margin for error. That's what debt does. It eliminates your margin for error, and when you remove that, you remove your survival buffer. Buffett and I never tried to be the smartest investors. We tried to be the last one standing. That's a much smaller, much better target. See, when you're debt-free, you can afford to wait. While everyone else panics, you can think. When others sell, you can buy. And when opportunity knocks, you can open the door because nobody else is holding it shut from the outside. People think financial freedom is a destination. It's not. It's a condition, and it begins the moment nobody else has a claim on your decisions. The modern investor wants both freedom and leverage, but they're opposites. One gives you control, the other sells it. You can't be halfway independent, just like you can't be halfway pregnant. Either you're free or you're owned by someone. If you still need to check with the lender before making a decision, you're owned. If you still calculate your risk tolerance based on monthly payments, you're owned. If your peace of mind depends on low interest rates, congratulations. You're renting tranquility, and rented tranquility always expires. People don't understand that debt is a subtle master. It doesn't yell, it whispers. It says, don't take that risk. Don't quit that job. Don't wait for the right opportunity. It shapes your behavior until you think you're making your own choices, but you're not. You're just managing your obligations. And the great irony is, most people who fall into this trap were just trying to be financially responsible. They wanted to build credit or use leverage smartly, and they ended up serving a system that never sleeps. I'm not saying don't invest. I'm saying you have to earn the right to invest. You earn that by first buying back your freedom, by eliminating the debt that controls you. Once you do that, the math of compound interest becomes your ally. You can sit quietly. You can let time work. You can ignore the noise because you're no longer playing defense. So, should you invest or pay your debt? The real question is simpler. Do you want to own your life or owe it? Choose once. Choose wisely, because that choice also compounds. People hate the word slow. It hurts their ego. They want results now. The body in 6 weeks, the fortune in 6 months, the freedom in 6 years. But that's not how compound interest works. Compound interest requires patience, And patience is impossible when you have debt. That's why the slow path, the one based on saving, staying debt-free, and investing consistently, looks boring to most people. They don't realize boredom is the secret ingredient to lasting wealth. By eliminating debt from your life, time becomes your ally instead of your predator. You stop running, you start compounding, and slowly, quietly, the world tilts in your favor. The problem is, nobody brags about getting rich slowly. It doesn't sound impressive. There's no thrill in living below your means or paying the mortgage early, but there's tremendous peace in it. And peace is what allows wisdom to compound. I've watched people chase hot stocks, crypto, fads, real estate bubbles, all financed by borrowed money. They call it seizing opportunity. I call it seizing illusion, because every cycle ends the same way. Leverage gets wiped out, and the patient get wealthy. Wealth built slowly doesn't collapse. It survives recessions, inflation, bad presidents, and bad luck because it's not based on momentum. It's built on margin of safety. Buffett and I never got rich quick. We sure got rich. And that's a better deal. Every investor should tattoo this in their mind. Hurrying kills compound interest. You can't rush exponential growth. You can only avoid doing stupid things long enough for it to happen. And debt, my friend, is the stupidest thing you can normalize, because while you're paying interest, someone is making money off you. Every loan you take is an investment you made for your lender. That's the paradox of getting rich slowly. The moment you stop chasing easy money, your real wealth begins, because you finally stop interrupting the power of compound interest with nonsense. I remember telling a young man who complained about how long it would take to get rich through saving and investing. I said, "Do you plan to live long?" He said, "Of course." I said, "Then why not spend it getting rich slowly?" It's the only method that actually works. Most people want to live life at full speed. I'd rather outlast it. Sprinters make noise. The ones who endure make money. So the path of living debt-free isn't just financially sound, it's philosophically sound. It aligns you with time instead of pitting you against it. And time, unlike leverage, never betrays the disciplined. So yeah, pay the debt, then stay debt-free, then invest patiently, then wait. You'll look slow for a decade. Then one day you'll look stunning, and the world will call it luck. But it won't be luck. It'll be math, patience, and an absence of stupidity. That's how compound interest rewards those who respect it. Not with speed, but with certainty. If there's one lesson I've learned after nearly a century watching people make and lose money, it's this. The goal of the game isn't to get rich, it's to stay free. Every financial decision you make should serve that single purpose. Freedom from debt, freedom from desperation, freedom from stupidity. Because once you lose freedom, everything else becomes negotiation. And you can't negotiate with compound interest. It always wins. People ask me, "Charlie, what's the smartest financial decision an average person can make?" I tell them, don't get over-indebted. Don't rush. Don't envy. Do that for 50 years and you'll look like a genius. But people don't like simple rules. They prefer complicated lies. They want a shortcut that feels sophisticated. They want to optimize before they stabilize. Well, you can't optimize chaos. You can only eliminate it. And debt, whether it's credit card or balance sheet, is institutionalized chaos. It guarantees instability. It guarantees that no matter how good your ideas are, you'll always be playing defense. Look, you can't predict markets. You can't control recessions, inflation, or interest rates, but you can control whether you owe money to someone. That's real power. The investors who sleep best at night aren't the ones with the highest returns. They're the ones who can go to sleep knowing nobody can call a loan in the morning. That peace of mind compounds faster than any index fund. Buffett and I used to say, we'd rather be roughly right than precisely wrong. Well, paying off debt is always roughly right, even if it doesn't make you rich fast, but it makes you unbreakable. And in this world, Not being broke is the best competitive advantage there is. I've lived long enough to watch bubbles rise and fall. Housing, tech, crypto, you name it. And the same pattern repeats. People without debt get ridiculed on the way up and envied on the way down. They look boring in good times and brilliant in bad times. That's the reward for being rational when everyone else is reckless. You don't build a good life on borrowed stability. The world is too unpredictable for that. But you can build one on discipline, patience, and a refusal to owe. So if you're still debating whether to invest or pay your debt, here's my final answer. Always pay your debt. Then invest from a position of strength, not weakness. Let your money compound, not your anxiety. Because when you finally owe nothing to anyone, something extraordinary happens. You start making decisions for the right reasons, not from pressure. And that, my friend, is the true definition of wealth. Not your account balance, but the silence in your mind when nobody owns you. Not the market, not the bank, not your cravings. When you reach that point, you've won the game. That's the only kind of wealth worth chasing. The kind that allows you to wake up every morning and think clearly, without fear, without pressure, without anyone owning your time. I've watched fortunes come and go. I've watched brilliant people lose everything and mediocre people build empires. And the difference was never intelligence, it was freedom. The freedom to wait, the freedom to say no, the freedom to think. You want to know what the best investment I ever made was? It wasn't Berkshire Hathaway, it wasn't See's Candies or Coca-Cola. It was the decision to never owe anyone anything I couldn't pay immediately. That single choice gave me 70 years of uninterrupted compound returns. No margin calls, no desperate decisions, no sleepless nights wondering if the bank would come knocking. Just time, patience, and the freedom to let good ideas mature. That's worth more than any leveraged return you can calculate on a spreadsheet. So this is what I want you to remember when you close this and go back to your life. Debt isn't just a financial decision, it's a philosophical one. It's a choice about how you want to live. Do you want to spend your life managing obligations or creating opportunities? Do you want to react to the world or respond to it? Do you want to be owned by someone or be free? The math is simple. The psychology is complicated. But if you can get both right, if you can get out of debt and stay out, time will reward you in ways you can't imagine today. Because when you're free, truly free, the world looks different. Opportunities you couldn't see before suddenly appear. Risks you couldn't take before become manageable, and decisions you couldn't make before become obvious. That's what financial independence gives you. It's not just changing your bank account, it changes your perspective. And perspective, well, that's the rarest quality in the investment world. You can't buy it. You can't borrow it. You can only earn it by refusing to let anyone else own your future. I'm 99 years old now. I've seen everything twice and learned it once. And if there's one truth I'd bet my life on, it's this. The person who owes nothing fears nothing. That's the greatest competitive advantage in a world built on fear. So pay your debt, stay free, invest wisely, and let compound interest do what it does best. Reward the patient and punish the reckless. That's not just good advice. That's the only advice that matters. Because at the end of the day, wealth without freedom is just poverty with better furniture. And nobody, not even the smartest investor in the world, can compound their way around that truth. One late payment, one refinance, one bridge loan, and suddenly you've lost 5 years of compound interest. People think getting rich is about intelligence. No, it's about staying in the game long enough for compound interest to kick in, and debt takes you out of the game early. So next time someone brags about how they're using leverage smartly, remember this. You don't beat the power of compound interest by being clever. You beat it by being consistent.